We think that it's this, we think that it's that, but ultimately, what is the barrier that's going to get in the way of us staying on that path in pursuit of our goals? What is the derail, and how can we maintain humility to recognize that probability is high for that derail coming out? And what are we going to do to get back on track?
If you can't write out what your schedule was on a day-to-day basis, how are you going to eventually get to the point where you can calculate and track the food you're eating on a day-to-day basis? And not only that, track the fact that you're not eating quote unquote enough food to what your brain thinks so that you can lose weight. Hey everybody, it's Bianca.
Welcome back, Evolvers. It's Emilia. Happy Monday. I believe it's Monday when we're producing this one.
Happy day.
Either way.
Whatever day it is.
Happy day. Yeah, seriously. And today we are going to be digging into all things developing self-discipline. So B and I have talked about this concept of self-discipline, and we've woven it in, B, I feel like, in a lot of different episodes, but I don't think that we've gone at it from the throat in a long time. So I'm excited for this episode to get right on in there and help
right into the
understand.
jugular.
Right to the jugular. Yeah. And help people understand that, number one, they're not alone when it comes to developing self-discipline, and recognize that we all struggle with this. So if you're struggling right now with self-discipline and you clicked on this episode, you're in the right place. We're going to give 3 big takeaways when it comes to this episode. And as always, to understand more about this topic, Bianca and I are always just a DM away. So to get us started, I want everyone, including ourselves, I just thought of this, to imagine something that we want, right? We're aspiring towards a goal, something that we deeply desire. I want you to have that in mind right now. So let's take a second. Okay. I got mine. Let me know when you got yours.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. So whatever that is, there is a path that needs to be traveled, true or false, in order to achieve, get, embody, attract, what have you, whatever that thing is. So I'll give an example using mine. So recently, as in the last 24 hours, I am cleaning out my laptop and I just accidentally deleted over 4,000 different files. So the desire that I have is to make sure that all of those 4,000 files get back in the right place. Now, that's a goal that I'm going to have, and I'm going to look to complete within the next 24 hours so that this laptop is squeaky clean, brand new, right? So there's a path that obviously I have to travel for that. Just like there's a path of my goal, my desire to drop 10 pounds or to eat cleaner, right? There's a goal, there's a desire, there's a want in mind, but there's a path we all have to travel in order to do and get and achieve and embody whatever it is that we want. So B, that thing that's in your mind. 0 to 10, how clear is the path? And if you want to share, feel free. But if you don't, you don't have to.
I need to share it because I need to start saying this out loud for myself. Okay. The path for me is attracting a abundant, holistic man into my life. That eventually will lead to marriage. I know, I want to throw up. I haven't said that out loud, except I think to Alan and you.
But in this form, this is big. So, okay.
It's also part of the self-discipline.
Right. So with that being named and with you leaning forward in that vulnerability, and everyone that's listening to this episode is going to have a different desire, a different want, a different goal, right, in mind. And hopefully they use this episode as a vessel to really understand the key takeaways that we're going to be bringing forth from here on out, which is there is a path. Every single goal, every single desire has a path that we're each going to have to walk. So the way in which I navigate making sure that those files are back in their right folders within the next 24 hours, so that Isaac doesn't have a panic attack, that is going to be my path for you attracting your dream partner, and one that is holistic in the manner that you have, right? That there's a specific path And now everyone knows the path to your goals, the path to your dreams, the path to whatever it is that you want in your life or that you want to get rid of in your life, cue the 10, 20 pounds, right? That path is not always linear. However, right? So for example, you can have derails and you can come back to the path and whatnot. However, when it comes to self-discipline, more often than not, we get started on that path with a lot of excitement. Cue the New Year's resolutions, clear once you have that, or cue once you have that clarity of whatever it is that you want. You get really excited, lots of motivation, lots of excitement, right? And you start headed down whatever you think that path is. And then all of a sudden life happens, hits you in the face, and your friends are asking you to come hang out for the weekend. Your family has to go traveling and do this. So can you watch the dogs? Your auntie, uncle, like all these things, your career, all this stuff starts happening in your life. Now, what happens to that path that you were excited about, that you were on? Naturally, we get derailed. So B, I want you to think about, and we're going to lead by example. I want you to think about like one derail that can happen in your pursuit of this goal, of this embodiment of what it is that you currently named. What's one potential thing that has a high probability because of life of getting in the way of obtaining, embodying, attracting that?
Letting my emotions get in the way of me doing the inner work that I know I need to do, to heal the things that are making me not ready to attract that yet.
Yeah. Fair.
So like if I do a session with my therapist and it's too overwhelming and then I numb out or I run away from the feelings instead of like really sitting with them, that's a derail.
Yeah. Way to go. Way to name that. And way to be super self-aware to understand like how that one little element can not only derail initially, but also how that can happen again and again. For me with the files, it is Saturday night, right? Saturday night, I could be after I'm done with sessions, I'm done with recordings, I could have all those fun little micro projects that I want to do in my house, that I want to do in my office. All of these fun little projects, I like those are sirens because I've just been at it at the computer and I might want a relief. So my emotions also might crave that I sway from making sure that those files get put back, right? Before you know it, Saturday night leads to Sunday. Sunday, all of a sudden, oh my goodness, it comes around. Now that's a shorter time period. So you and I are in real time are comparing something that we want, we were striving for, we're desiring in the short term, which is kind of what I'm representing. You're representing something in the long term. But what we're both recognizing is that there's a short-term barrier that can get in the way of us working towards that goal, working towards achieving and or attracting and embodying that which we desire. This is what happens with everyone all the time around self-discipline. We think that it's procrastination. We think that it's this. We think that it's that. But ultimately, what's underneath this is we haven't identified, which is step number 1, we haven't identified the barrier. What is the barrier that's going to get in the way of us staying on that path in pursuit of our goals? What is the derail, in other words, that we're going to experience? And how can we maintain humility to recognize that the probability is high for that derail coming out? And what are we going to do to get back on track? So step number 2, when we've identified the barrier to self-discipline or staying on the track, for lack of better words, what do we do next, B? Like, what is the next thing when you identify it? You and I both know we have an example in mind. What do we do from there? We understand, right? We have to understand where that barrier is
I was
coming
saying,
from.
are you asking me or are you posing the question and then
dramatic pause? No, you and I have both talked about this, right? Because ultimately underneath whatever derails us, Yes, there's emotions, but there's ultimately some type of belief or some type of emotion or thought that is encouraging that derail to continue, right? Why we don't get
Mm.
back on track in pursuit of our goals and our dreams or whatever it is that we want, right? So, for example, you have that therapy call, all of a sudden that's overwhelming and the emotion doesn't want to deal with it. So you run away from it, right? There's thoughts, there's a belief, there's emotions and feelings underneath all of that to where, okay, yeah, you've identified that barrier, but you've let that barrier taken over your mode of operation, AKA self discipline is not going to be in existence unless you understand why this barrier exists in the first place. So you mentioned discomfort.
Mm.
Talk to me a little bit about how, especially around this topic, right? We have so many different clients, so many different people that we've seen around the world and different, age ranges and different genders and different backgrounds. What have you seen when it comes to this step number 2, which is understanding the identified barrier? What have you found to be the biggest thing for people when we get underneath that and we begin to understand? Maybe it's that discomfort, maybe it's that fear. Like, what are you seeing when it comes to people in this arena?
I'm going to discuss both of our genius zones, quote unquote, and our modalities of work. So there's usually a part that has a really limiting belief about what's possible for it or what's possible in the world in general. So I'll use myself as an example, just since we're in the dialogue already.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that for a really, really long time, I was actively pushing away any chance for real love because I was terrified of not being good enough or deserving of the type of love that I actually wanted. And so what I did was I unconsciously set the expectation so high and then convinced myself of a narrative that it's not actually out there and that it's not possible, so that I could feel justified in the fact that I haven't found it yet. And that the reason I ended up in all of the negative circumstances that I was in was just because of whatever the thing was that was going on. When the reality was, I had a part that had an unconscious belief, or had a very, very firmly held belief, that I'm actually not deserving of the love that's out there. It's not that it's not out there, it's that I didn't believe I was deserving of it. And so what I was doing was misaligning myself with the wrong people, or setting myself up to fail, or self-sabotaging, or not putting myself out there. And all of that ended up being a reinforcing pattern that basically was a doom loop of like, see, I knew it. It's not there. See,
Right.
look, I'm doing everything. I'm doing all of this stuff. I'll use a different example too. When it comes to fitness and nutrition, so many people that I've talked to don't actually believe they're capable of achieving the outcome that they want. And so when they're in the moment and the uncomfortable feelings come up for them, they lean into that uncomfortable feeling of, I'm not going to be able to do it anyway, so why not let myself have this thing that I want? Screw it, just eat the cookie.
Yeah.
Because I can't achieve it anyways. So I might as well just enjoy now and not deprive myself. So it almost always comes down to a part that has a limiting belief that's controlling the behavior.
Right. Yeah. And speaking, on the topic of control, thank you so much for that, because I think it helps clarify for anyone that did have something, right, that used this episode to really understand and grab in mind where they might be struggling in self-discipline. Okay, they identified step number 1. They identified what their barrier might be, or what a potential barrier that might derail them. Number 2, they can use what you just said in the examples to maybe recognize, like, do I have a part, or what part of me might I have that has this firmly held belief that believes that either I'm not deserving or it's not worth it, deep down. And what element of that is actually controlling my behavior? AKA
Yeah.
not having me get back on the path that I know that I'm supposed to get on. Not necessarily because it like I should or whatever. It's because there's a path to success for my goals, my dreams, my aspirations, my embodiment, whatever that be. And that's so important for us to hear. And I think that that reminder is so helpful, because when we talk about self-discipline, if we were to have a shared meaning, it's around the ability to control one's self, especially when it comes to difficult situations. By definition, that is self-discipline in a nutshell. It's not the ability to control others. It's not the ability to control circumstances. Your hunger cues are going to come up. All of a sudden, your stomach is going to be garbling because it's perceptively starving, right? There's going to be amazing invites to go do all these things that are easily distractible from your path. But do you have the ability? Do you have the capability to override when that belief, that small belief that is deeply powerful, do you have the ability to control your own impulses, your own behaviors, even your own thoughts, and how you perceive your emotions in those difficult emotions? That is the skill, the biggest skill that I find with clients to be the most difficult out of all of these threes that we're going to give, because of the fact that more often than not, we struggle to go in our inner world and really parse out and comb through what is that one belief that's holding everything else back. That's where you and I's work does so incredibly in the world from my perspective. For anyone that's struggling in that regard, just imagine, right? Imagine that there is a belief that might be holding you back. What might that belief be, right? AKA this barrier that's preventing you to get back on the path. So then step number 3 comes in. Okay, let's say we have this, right? We have identified the barrier that's preventing us to be able to reach our goal, right? Which ultimately is what we label the self-discipline issue, but it's underneath that. Then we go one layer deeper to step number 2, which is understanding where that's coming from, where specifically in the inner world. And we zoomed in on a part in a specific limiting belief. Third step is take a baby step in the opposite direction. This is a DBT technique that you and I have even used and talked about, which is when you're feeling discomfort, what you normally would go and do with that discomfort would be, okay, eat that cookie, would be avoid really journaling and reflecting on this. Let's do the opposite of that. Let's put that cookie back down. Let's actually take that journaling technique seriously. Let's instead maybe go for a walk for a second and then come back to this journaling technique, right? We're not actually doing what our emotions are telling us we should do. And that is so powerful, because when you can do that, small little baby steps, that helps you get back from that derail back onto that path of whatever it is that you're pursuing. And I know this is a funny example and might sound very odd for some people, but one of the things that had happened recently was a client had come to me, and we had been working together for some time now. And I was, this was a couple months ago. I was asking about the goals. What do you have goals for this year? Like, just want to obviously get a general consensus of what 2025 is pointing towards, right? And I could tell after talking with him, he was really struggling to not necessarily define his goals, because he has very clear goals in statistical comparison, but it was more so the self-discipline aspect that he said that that's really where he was struggling. And so when we kind of got underneath all of the underlying barriers and the beliefs, what we found out to be a very impactful belief, it actually was inhibiting his behaviors from actually putting the metrics in a spreadsheet that were necessary to track for his goals. And so understandable, right? I'm not going to get into those details, but what I had him do, this is the fun part. What I had him do, I said, listen, we're not going to go, like, I know the path for you absolutely is track these metrics, right? You you literally can't achieve your goals if we don't have the data points that help us understand where you're currently at, right? And this is, goals 101. But I'm going to want you to do something that sounds really weird, and just trust me on it. It's going to be low barrier. It's going to be easy. It's going to be simple. But it might not be comfortable. And that was the thing that I said. And he goes, "Uh-oh." He's
Uh,
like, you can visibly just like uncomfortable and just like he's giggling, but he trusts me and I adore this man. And he goes, "Okay, what is it?" I'm like, what hand do you brush your teeth with? And he goes, "My right." And I'm like, and then you could see he was like, "Oh no, she's gonna have me do something." I'm like, "All right, well, for the next 7 days, I'm gonna ask you to brush your teeth with your left hand." And what came over him, I thought was really interesting. He actually got really excited to do something
Hmm.
different than what he's done. And I explained to him how, although that might not feel connected when it comes to this topic of self-discipline and goal and aspiration, etc., what we're going to do is we're going to exercise a part of your brain that's a muscle that helps with controlling our own behaviors, controlling our impulses. And so by doing that opposite technique that I mentioned just a second ago, we started not necessarily in the goal directive arena on that path, but we chose a little bit of a different path that naturally he's already doing every single day, right? Brushing his teeth every single day with his right hand. And we said, okay, in a non pressurized situation, let's just brush with the left hand. And so his body got used to the fact that we can do seemingly hard things where there's going to be resistance, where there's going to be discomfort, when it doesn't feel natural or normal, but I trust the process. And self discipline is a lot in that element of trusting the process. And it might not look the way in which you might believe it to be, because more often than not, we have those parts that are advocating for a different path, which is usually discomfort, running away from fear, running away from any sort of evidence that might be contrary to that
Mm.
belief. So, super powerful. And with everyone that's listening to this episode, the third step, it starts with small steps. And maybe this insight could give you a little science project to see like what might be in my world that I could do the opposite technique with, just to develop that meta skill that's helpful when it comes to self-discipline.
I think one of the biggest things that makes people struggle with self discipline is the avoidance and the resistance of starting small. You and I
Mm.
have heard from so many people, it doesn't feel worth it if I'm only doing these small things. It doesn't feel worth it
Right.
taking these baby steps because the thing that I want is all the way down there. And these
Mhm.
baby steps aren't going to get me there. No, they're not. But the thing is, the baby steps help you build the skill
Mhm.
to be able to do it consistently enough to where you can do the bigger things that you know you need to do and trust that you're going to be able to do them. If you can't brush your teeth every day,
Yeah.
let alone brush your teeth with your left hand every day, it's only for 7 days. How are you going to track your systems and your habits every single day? If you can't write out what your schedule was
Mm.
on a day-to-day basis, how are you going to eventually get to the point where you can calculate and track the food you're eating on a day-to-day basis? And not only that, track the fact that you're not eating quote unquote enough food to what your brain thinks so that you can
Mhm.
lose weight. Because when
Mhm.
you're trying to lose weight, you're in a calorie deficit, which means you're eating less than what your body needs to sustain itself just on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
So if you can't do these seemingly small things, how are you going to do the bigger things that are actually going to get you to what it is that you inevitably want? So if you're
Yeah.
finding yourself having resistance to doing the small things, I think there's something much deeper under that. And I would go through these steps again of number 1 and number 2 of what's the barrier here and where is this really coming from? Why am I so resistant to this? Because I guarantee there's a limiting belief under that, or there's a part that's throwing a tantrum that doesn't want to be
Change.
exposed to the light. Yeah, and that
Mhm.
doesn't want to change.
Yeah.
Self belief, just like anything, is a skill. Every single thing that we talk about on this podcast, it comes down to a skill that you can develop. And if you're subscribed to this show and if you listen consistently, you are going to develop a growth mindset. And then you can understand and develop the belief that I'm capable of developing these skills if I give it enough time.
Mhm.
That is hands down the only reason why I went from the broken little girl that I used to be to the woman that I am now, and the woman that I aspire to be, who kind of full circle will eventually attract the dream partner that I have, and for us to have a magnificent relationship. And that's exactly what Emilia did.
Oh yeah.
It's it's the it's the small, seemingly insignificant things that build over time that eventually help you get to the place that you want to be. So if you're not willing to do the small, there's no way you're going to do the big. Sorry, I'm now done.
You're good. You're good. No, it's so true. It's less my final sentiment on this episode. So powerful. Although it might have been a little bit more boring and less sexy than other episodes. It's those principles, right? It's less of a question. B, you and I used to have the Why Power podcast. It's less of a question of our why power, right? Because we can think of 1,000 reasons why we want to lose 15 pounds, or why we want our body composition to look like Mark Wahlberg, or why we want to be the best athlete in the world, or why we want to be the best mom in the world, whatever, right? Why we might want to make sure that our 4,000 files get stored back where they need to be. It's less of a question of why power, and it's far more of a dialogue and a skill of willpower. Because willpower, it is requiring those seemingly small, insignificant skill sets, the meta skills that build up the infrastructure and the humility to take the process seriously. And the process, right? There's a quote that says something along the lines of, it's better to take many small steps forward than to take one giant leap seemingly forward, only to stumble backwards. And that's what this episode is all about. We are such a culture, we are such a society of wanting to take big, meaningful leaps, only to stumble backwards, and to have our self-esteem, to have our parts take another hit. And I just don't want that for our community. So let's take the small steps. Let's link arms. Let's link hands. Let's take those small steps together. And let's make sure that we're exercising that willpower and efforts to embody and create and cultivate more self-discipline. So with that being said, my episode suggestion, if you like this episode, is 285, a Motivational Monday episode, which is 3 surefire ways to feel more confident. I'm really building on this one, TBH. B?
324, why nobody actually wants growth. If you want to build the skill of self-discipline and you know that you need accountability from somebody else to get started, number 1, welcome to the club. So do we all. And number 2, please, please, please do not hesitate to reach out. Emilia and I are both still taking clients. We have the You Do You program. We have one-on-one coaching or therapy. There's also so many options available for you at Evolve if that doesn't feel like a step you're ready for. So please reach out, and we can't wait to connect with all of you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.